Hi everybody, thank you for tuning in for the ServeCon Bloggers panel. I'm Kimberly Faber of ServeNow, and here with me today is Amanda Sexton and Joseph Click. Amanda is the marketing manager for DGR Legal in New Jersey and manages their corporate blog at dgrlegal.com/blog. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi.
And Joseph is the owner of iServePapers based in California, and you can view his blog at iservepapers.com/blog. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Thanks for having me. Hello from San Diego.
All right, so before we get started, just a quick note. If you have questions about blogging during the panel, you can add your question into the webinar, or you can go ahead and write those questions down and tweet them to us at ServeNow, or you can email them to me directly at kfaber@servenow.com. Joseph, Amanda, and I will take a look at all of these questions and answer them in a follow-up blog post early next week. So the first question that I really want to start with is a pretty simple one. Should every process server blog, and why or why not? Amanda?
My first response to that is absolutely. I think the benefits from a standpoint of having people find you online from blogging and the efforts and the brand recognition is great. So I look at it from that marketing perspective, but also from the perspective of being in the process service industry. I think there's not enough discussion that goes on with what's happening on a state level, on a national level. So I think just getting the information out there is great. There's a lot of times that I get an email from a state association about something that we wouldn't have known about otherwise. So the more people that are talking about it, the better informed we are when these kind of pieces of legislation pop up in other states, so we know how to handle it.
Excellent. And Joe, how about you?
I think everybody should blog, process servers or not. It's fun, even if you're not a writer. It's something new to try. It's kind of how I got into it, more of kind of a hobby, and it turned out to be such a fascinating thing to do. I really enjoy it. Process servers specifically, certainly, there's tons of benefits. You get your name out there, you show that you know what you're doing, you can build some value in your brand, in your company. Just for those things alone, everybody should take a crack at it for sure.
Great, and I definitely agree with both of you. I don't think it's a question of whether or not to blog. I think it's really a question of when to start blogging. And I think that comes from deciding, you know, I'm just starting to get this business going. I only have so many hours in the day. What can I devote to blogging? And really, you might not be there until your third or fourth or fifth even month or even year in business. I think it's just about trying to find a time to incorporate it. But if your goal is to have a strong internet presence and be able to connect with potential clients, blogging is one of the best ways to get started there. So I think it's definitely crucial. Everybody should blog. I do agree with that. I think part of the dilemma that comes along with that conversation, though, is not understanding what the actual concrete benefits are. What major benefits have the both of you seen as a direct result of your blogging, and what do you hope to see as far as what value it will add in the future? Joe?
Well, when I started out, the blogging in general, writing and getting that information out there was kind of part of an overall package of getting my website out there, getting my search engine optimization up, helping people find me so they could hire me so I could continue to do this as a business. So that's been a great benefit. It has helped a lot. ServeNow, Kimberly, you personally have been a great help. You've picked up some of my articles. I've written a couple of guest posts, and that's really worked wonders for my SEO to help people find me. And the other benefit that's kind of overshadowed that at this point is getting calls from clients saying, I read a couple articles on your site, you clearly know what you're doing, I want to hire you, you've answered all my questions. I love getting calls like that. It makes my job a little easier, and it's really nice to get that feedback from people that, you know, people that I'm writing towards. Here are the clients I want to help with this information, and then getting them to call and say, hey, I read it, it helped, let's do business together.
And Amanda, how about you?
I would have to agree. It's definitely been great to be getting calls from people rather than having to go down and track down people individually. You know, the cost is a lot better for us, the return that we're getting. So to write one article and get 3 phone calls for it is a lot better than knocking on doors and other things that we might have to do. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really just a concrete way of reaching out to your client base and showing them that you know what you're doing, that you are an expert in your field, and it can help your website rank if you understand SEO and how it works and are able to optimize, you know, your title tags and everything that you need to in order to show up there. But from my perspective, it's really so much more about the reader and the people who are finding that blog and able to connect with what you've put out there. And I think that's it's an easy way to get your expertise out there before they've even become that phone call. So it's just a really great starting point. ServeNow has obviously followed both of your blogs for quite some time. We're definitely avid about sharing the content you guys are putting out there. Amanda, one of the great things I think about the blog at DGR Legal is that you're able to put out new content really frequently. And not only that, you're able to cover a huge range of topics. I mean, I've seen you cover legislation, news, association events, and even more complex aspects of process service. So your blog launched in September of 2012, and in that time you've written over 140 articles, which is impressive. I want to talk about your decision to launch the blog. What was your initial strategy and goal for blogging, and how has that evolved since that launch?
In the beginning, when we first started, it was more a thing where we kept hearing about you should really have a blog. For people to find you online, you should have one. And we kind of stepped into it a little tentatively. Okay, let's try this. We'll see what our return is. And we'll go from there. And so in the beginning, it was more we were just posting for SEO. We were looking, okay, how do we want people to find us online, taking those words and then writing an article about it. And over time, we've kind of tried to become more of a go-to source for information. So whereas something might pop up in the news, and I might not have a whole hour to devote to really creating this article where there's a lot of comprehensive background information, I'll take a few minutes, write the article, and make sure it gets out there so people know about it. So that's kind of changed as we've gone along, rather from focusing on these really, informative pieces to kind of just piecemeal things that people can pick up throughout their day that might help them.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've really focused on striking the balance between that really meaty content you need to get out there and then the quicker newsworthy stuff that someone's got to share.
Yes, absolutely.
And Joseph, your blog also launched in 2012. You've also written an ebook about how to hire a process server, which is a huge accomplishment. You put together articles breaking down the how and why of process service, and you even discuss software solutions, business strategies that other process servers can find helpful. And this is all done in 11 really, really meaty posts that have such a great run of information in them and really cover every question and aspect of the topic. What made you decide to launch your blog, and did you have any apprehension or doubts about getting started?
Well, first, thank you very much for those kind words. I appreciate that. I was filled with apprehension when I started my blog. I'd never done that before. I've never been much of a writer, so that was definitely a new experience for me, and I'd never really put together a website from scratch. I've been in the business for a number of years, but a couple of years ago I really wanted to start focusing on helping clients in my area that were trying to go through a court matter without an attorney. I do a lot of work with just one-off clients, really helping them through the process, and that's kind of what I'm focusing on now, helping those particular clients. So my initial goal was just, let's get some information out that people can read through, and a lot of it's about the industry, not necessarily specifically towards helping those clients hire me or make their decision, but just get some information out. I had an urge to share it anyway, being in the business for so long. So it really was just kind of diving in as part of the overall strategy of building out the new website and kind of getting the new iteration of my business going with the focus on these particular clients.
Yeah, and that actually brings up another point that we hear a lot in blogging. A blog does not encompass your 100% web presence and your overall web and marketing strategy. It's really something you really just captured, is that it's a component of everything else that we have going on in trying to get the name of the business out there. So when it comes to actual frequency of blogging, Amanda, you definitely touched on this as well. It's a management of resources. How much time can I devote to blogging? DGR Legal is definitely a little bit more sizable company with a handful of employees, and Papers definitely started as a one-man shop, and you're much more close to every aspect of the process. So with those different company sizes, how do you decide what percentage of your time should be devoted to blogging, and how does your company size affect your ability to blog? Jill, let's start with you.
My company size directly influences how much time I'm able to spend blogging. I'm still a one-man show for the most part. I personally am out there knocking on doors, serving the papers that I bring in my area, at least here in San Diego. And the direct correlation is, after writing some blog posts, getting picked up, getting some good exposure from them, I've been so busy that that's kind of taken a back seat. It's for me to really dedicate the time to continue to generate that content. It's something I know I need to do, but the focus has to be first on getting the job done, doing those things that that really build the brand. So that's definitely been a challenge. I'm not able to be as prolific as DGR, legal. Their blog is great. There's stuff like every day, sometimes multiple articles from news across the country, which is a great source of information. For me, it's the challenge to find the time, and I fall into the trap of editing too much sometimes and taking too long to go from my outline to the finished piece to publishing. So it's something I'm constantly working on.
And Amanda, it seems like you've really struck a balance between devoting the amount of whatever amount of resources you can to a blog and getting things out there more quickly. So why don't you share kind of how you've come to decide what percentage of your time goes into that and how your company size has influenced your strategy?
Thankfully, I mean, we're lucky enough to have a full-time position. We have about 80 employees, so we're able to have a full-time position myself to handle our marketing. So definitely we have a little bit more time to devote, or a lot more time than the individuals like Joe, which is really impressive to be able to run this day-to-day operation, the administrative tasks, and then to take on marketing after doing that all day. So that definitely influences how much time we have. It kind of started in the beginning more of working backwards. Okay, how much time does it take to write an article? How much time does it take to edit? And that's gotten smaller as we've gone on. I found more tools, things that bring the content to me, ways to get it out, so I'm not taking a huge chunk of time out of my day. But that said, it's definitely a priority for us. We're starting to see the return. So in the beginning, we're like, okay, we'll put 5% of our time in, we'll see how many people start calling us, and then we'll go from there. And over time, we've realized this is a really beneficial thing for us, so we'll start devoting more time to it.
And one of the things that I've noticed with blogging and people who are getting into writing professionally or as a way to promote their business is that the more you do it, the faster you get at it, and the more quickly you're able to figure out, what do I need to get this post out there, where can I find this core information? And so it does get a little bit easier with time. The first few are always, I remember my first posts on ServeNow were just so challenging, and I was stressed out thinking, how am I going to write all of this? And now I can write the same amount in so much less time just from having that practice. I think this is a really good transition point to get more into the actual creation of the content and measuring success, which I think is kind of this big, strange thing to everybody, because there's a lot of information out there that says, yes, you need a blog, here's why you need a blog, but it doesn't talk about breaking down the different components of putting together a strategy for an individual post or how you actually go about writing that. So the first question I want to ask is, how do you set goals for your blog posts, or do you at all? Amanda?
We absolutely set goals. It kind of helps us decide what we're going to do. So each post specifically has a goal, whether it's to just help us out with our rankings or to just get information out there. So we try, like we've talked about before, to kind of keep that balance as we're going throughout it.
Great. And Joe, how about you?
Yeah, my overall goal is always just to generate excellent and valuable content and get some information out there. I don't really set goals for individual blog posts other than to just get it done with no typos and get it published. I don't have the luxury a lot of times of really tracking a lot of the analytics of, did this post bring in more visitors than another, and where is it being shared. It's fun to look at those things, but for me it's always just been, this is something I know I need to do, and it's been super beneficial. The more I do it, the more returns I get from it. So the goal is just basically share the information that I've got by being in this industry for 14 years the best way that I can, and just kind of let the ball roll from there.
Yeah, and I think that actually pretty well summarizes the difference between having a full-time marketer and balancing blogging with everything else you have going on. Someone in a full-time marketing role can definitely delve into those analytics and really get concrete about what language are my readers liking and what titles are getting shared more, whereas Joe, your focus definitely is much more on, let's get this out. I know I have this information within me. I'm an expert. If it gets me some phone calls, that's great, but I may not be able to check the analytics for every single post. So I think that's actually really interesting.
Yeah, very true. And another point on that is that these things take time. That's something I learned quite early. I think I went into it prepared. I'm not going to see results right away on this. It's something that's just going to be a process over time, and it definitely does take time, but you can kind of feel that momentum as you generate the content, as you get out there and things start to get shared. It's amazing how things are picked up and who actually ends up seeing your content that you didn't even intend or have any idea how they found it. The momentum starts going and it gets really exciting. So it's definitely something that even individuals that are busy, you find some time to do it and you're going to see the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Amanda, with your focus on the analytics as well, I think you'll see what I see a lot in my work, is that there are certain posts that have not necessarily a shelf life, but they're very, very relevant to what's happening now. So you're putting out something on a new bill proposed by, the Association of New York or something like that. And then you have your more, what in marketing we call evergreen content, which breaks down different processes and is really just the bigger posts that are up there that will build that traffic and engagement over time. So getting into creation a little bit more, how do you decide what to blog about, and what would you say is a good strategy for coming up with ideas? Amanda, let's start with you.
That's something that over time I'd like to think I got a little bit better at. I remember in the beginning sitting down and kind of panicking, what am I going to write about? So now I kind of try to go through and tag things as I go along. I use Evernote, which is a great tool. It just lets me tag articles, anything I come across online. So that way when I sit down, I have 5 or 6 things that I might want to talk about. And also things that just pop up. There's things in our office that happen all the time, and our servers might have these tips that are helpful for other people out there. So I kind of use both of those to help come up with content.
And Joe, what strategies do you have for coming up with ideas?
A lot of my posts started with just thinking about a certain topic as I'm, say, driving around from point A to point B. I also will mention Evernote. I love that app, that software. It's very handy to keep track of ideas. Hey, I just had 3 or 4 ideas that could each be a possible post down the road. Let's make sure I take a note of that and revisit. Audio recording as well. Especially driving around, since I'm actually out there serving papers all the time. Half of my articles were kind of written and fleshed out just by me kind of talking to myself into my phone, recording those ideas. As far as kind of how to decide which topic to write about, mostly for me it's just kind of been what comes up and what's most interesting to me at the time, or what I feel like I want to share, with the world at this particular time.
Yeah, I think those are all great ideas for coming up with content, and a lot of process servers that out there that do blog, you will see them covering questions that they're asked very frequently, or different things that they're doing every single day and can vouch for and really break down at that expert level. One of the things that we've done is we actually spent 2 full months tracking every single question that we were asked, and from that we were able to gauge which questions we were getting asked more frequently that our content didn't cover at all, and that gave us a really good direction of 5 or 6 different blog posts that we needed to get drafted and out there, not only to free up our admins, who are great but their phones are ringing off the hook, but also to provide that information and have a presence in those search results, because I think we all know that people are so much less likely to pick up the phone and call somebody and ask, how does this work? They're going to go to Google and they're going to ask that question in the search engine. So answering whatever questions you're getting on your blog definitely opens you up to a huge, huge part of your client base. And I think in the marketing world, there are a lot of different philosophies about the length and frequency, and even a bigger debate of quality versus quantity, which, Amanda, I think you've definitely touched on. Is there a certain length that you think bloggers should aim for? I personally feel that word count is a thing of the past with the web, and now it's just kind of the content is however long the content needs to be. So do you think it's better to post shorter pieces more frequently, or longer pieces less frequently, or some sort of mix of both? Amanda, let's start with you.
I definitely aim for a mix of both. If there's something that I can say in 300 words, I try not to drag it out for 700 if I can get the point across quickly. But sometimes there's just so much information where you do need a longer article. I would agree that it's the thing of the past, the length of it. In the beginning, there was a lot of controversy. Is it 400 words? Is it 1,200? What's the importance? And I think right now the search engines are kind of just looking at what's important. How many people are reading this? Do they care about it? Do they stay on the page when they go to it? Is it relevant? And I think that's the most important thing for the reader too. They don't care how long it is. They'll read it if it's useful. It could be 1,600 words, but if it's a really great article, they'll take the time to read it. But it could be 200 and really poorly written and non-informative and has no relevance. So it's just a matter of what you need to get the information out there.
Definitely. And Joe, how about you? Any thoughts on that?
Sure, and I agree with Amanda. I think probably the best way to go, if you can boil it down to one or the other, is probably shorter, more frequent posts. That's kind of what I shoot for. I always end up on the other end of the spectrum once I actually get writing. If I say I'm going to try for 1,000 words, I'll be happy with that. That should be kind of enough to get my point across in a nice little nugget of information. It'll end up being 3,000 words by the time I'm done, and it's hard to kind of break it up and make multiple posts out of it. I think that's probably the way to go, just for the most benefits from an SEO standpoint and that sort of thing. But definitely quality over quantity. Content is king. If you just get the information out there the best way that you can, it's going to be picked up. You're going to get rewarded for that, I think. Not sure how it all works on the back end technically, but you get the information out there in a quality way and provide valuable information, you're going to see the results you want.
Yeah, and I think it also ties into understanding your tendencies as a writer. If you tend to be very short and maybe not include all of the information, you can work that into your strategy and focus on that. I myself tend to write way longer than I need to sometimes, so it's about editing that down. But I think one of the things, Amanda, that you brought up that's really important is understanding how Google ranking and how their analysis of your pages has changed. And really, even though they're looking at this from a very data-centric perspective, they're looking at how readers are engaging with the content. Are people staying on this page long enough to read it? Or are they going right back to the search results to find something else that will better answer their question? And that's something that's really shifted over the past 3 to 5 years, whereas you used to be able to put up something that had X number of keywords, the right header, the right title tags, and boom, it would rank. That's just not the case anymore. It's so much more about whether or not that content is of quality and doing what it's promising the reader to do. Talking solely about creation itself, so you have your idea, you know about how long you might want it to be, you have your goals set, so now you actually have to sit down and write this thing. And I've found in my search that there's a lot of really unhelpful advice out there about writing, and it usually just says something to the effect of, well, the best way to write a blog post is to sit down and write it. And that's really great for someone who's naturally gifted or has a lot of experience with writing, but is wildly unhelpful for anybody who's trying to get started and is new to this. So to give ServeCon attendees a better set of advice for tackling this kind of this very strange thing that they can't figure out, what strategies or tips do you have for process servers who want to blog but might not come by writing naturally? How would you recommend they tackle that task? Jill, let's start with you.
So every once in a while I'll get in the zone and I can just sit down and the words flow and it's like somebody else is doing it. It doesn't happen very often, but I'm super grateful when it does. Most of the time it's more of a process for me. I think the hardest part for me is just getting the words on the page, as I'm sure it is for a lot of people. One specific thing I've found that works really well for me is to start with an outline. I'll say, here's kind of the topic I want to talk about. I'm going to discuss A, B, and C. So you get those on your outline. Underneath each of those 3 points, maybe you put 3 kind of sub-points you want to touch on. Once you have that outline of here's kind of the overall flow of what I want to go for, I go back in and start writing a sentence. Okay, for topic A, there's like 2 words I want to talk about. I'm going to write a full sentence about that and go down the list and do that for each of your points on the outline. Get through that, you go back and you develop that sentence into a paragraph for each of those points. And as you start to do that, you kind of get into the flow, you get into the zone. You'll find yourself maybe breaking away from the outline and just kind of writing free form. But that's really been helpful for me, is kind of taking it in small pieces and then developing each of those pieces until you've got an article.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. Amanda, what would you recommend?
I mean, I completely agree with that. That's something I do the same thing when I'm having a problem writing or I'm kind of stuck. I know this has to get out today, and how am I going to do it? Just kind of, like you said, the process of it, getting it started. helps with that. And a lot of times too, what I'll do is something, if it's a news article related to that, I'll just look for background information. Sometimes just getting in that mindset of, okay, here's what else I can include, doesn't make it seem so cumbersome to have to come up with the rest of the information. So you already have a little basis there to start with.
Definitely, and I think these are tools that the three of us always use. I mean, the big thing I will say is that even for people who have tons of experience writing, writing is really hard. And so if you're sitting at your computer trying to tackle your first blog post and you don't have a whole lot of experience writing, you're doing something that is so challenging. And just know that those of us who have been blogging for years, we still have those moments where we just can't find the words and get it out. I use very much a hybrid of what the both of you have recommended. I outline, I make sure I do my research, and one thing that I found really helpful is taking my mind out of that expert role. So I put myself in the shoes of the reader, and I think, what questions are they going to have about this? What vocabulary are they not going to be familiar with and not understand? And really focus on it from that person's perspective. Because having all of the information, I find that it's very challenging to know what exactly should be put out there. And through outlining and kind of taking the reader's perspective on it, I think it's a little bit easier to break through those challenging moments where you have a topic, you know you have information about it, but you're not sure what to put out there. Do either of you have any other recommendations for actual content creation? Are there any other tools that you would recommend? Is there anything else any other resources that you use for coming up with ideas?
I would say Google Alerts. It's a great tool, especially for people who are just starting to blog. You just search and type in Google Alerts. You can set up alerts for anything that you want, whether it's process service in your state, alternate service, and Google will send you these notifications about things that are published across the web, whether it's a news article or a tweet. It'll send you either the best ones. You can get them once a week if every day is too much for you, but that kind of helps give you a little bit idea about what you can talk about if you're having a problem coming up with something, and that's something that I use. It's more good for those relevant articles, things that are timely and happening now, but I mean, you can even respond to one of those articles, talk about your comments on it or what you think or how that might impact things in your state. So we definitely use that constantly for ideas.
That's great. Joe, anything else from you to add?
For me, I don't write a whole lot of articles like Amanda does, kind of talking about news around the country and breaking events and that sort of thing. For me, it's mostly when I sit down and start to write, am I interested in what I'm writing? When I really hit on something that is pertinent to me at the moment, something I really want to share with people, that's when I find myself kind of getting in the zone and just being able to pound out the article and really get that kind of electric feeling of just cranking out the words and really doing a good job. Google Alerts, I think, is a great tool, not only for writing blog articles and how to come up with content, but for tracking things across your industry and any other topic that might affect you. I think that's wow, what a great tip.
Those are great tips. Thanks, both of you. Of course, we can't talk about blogging without talking about distribution, which can be a really big challenge, especially for people who are just getting started. How important would you say distribution is to your strategy, and what tools would you recommend to other process servers who are just starting out with blogging? Joe, let's start with you.
Probably not my strongest suit. I'll be right up front with that. I use a software called Hootsuite. Hootsuite.com, a free service that allows you to link your different social media profiles and kind of blast a notice out to all of them. I don't a lot of times have the luxury or choose to spend the time really being active on social media. I know it can be very helpful for some people. I basically write something. When I'm happy with it, I'll publish it on my blog and then blast out a notice to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, all through Hootsuite. Do one message, it gets blasted out everywhere, so people following me on any of those different sites or systems can find what I'm reading. So I really haven't put a huge focus on the best way to distribute what I'm writing, but it's worked. Just kind of following those basic guidelines of finding any way to just get the information out there and to blast it out. It kind of takes a life of its own at a certain point.
Absolutely. And Amanda, what distribution strategies are you using at DGR Legal?
I also use Hootsuite. I think it's fantastic. It kind of frees you up to not having to log into every individual social media site, which seems daunting when you publish this article and you've already done all of this work, and now it's like, okay, now I have to log into every site and publish it. Instead, it takes 2 minutes. It takes all of the work out of it, which is fantastic. And then you can see too through there people that have responded to the article and get back to them that way. And we also, since distribution is pretty important for us, we also have a newsletter. So we do a monthly email newsletter. It can be difficult for people in their day-to-day to take the time to come back to our blog and see what they publish or what we've published, or if they're not on social media, they might be missing out on it. So we just send them a little email newsletter once a month that has links to all of the articles that we might have published. That way they can kind of catch up on what's been going on.
Both really big cornerstones of any distribution strategy. I think the great thing about social media is that it's free. It's not costing you anything except for the time that you devote to doing it. And if you have a social media management tool that can make that easier, you can schedule out tweets so that you can set your post to go live multiple times over the next 4 months, only having to log in one time, and that makes it so much easier. And newsletters, not only for blogging distribution, but a great, great component of any marketing strategy. Moving on to measuring, which we've touched on a little bit, I think it's really the biggest mystifying question, and it ties into people not understanding or just being confused about where the value is in blogging, because it can be challenging to measure if you're not sure what to look at. So to the process servers that are asking, how exactly do I know that my blog post is successful, what would you have to say? I think that there are different ways that we can categorize success depending on where you're at with your strategy. Whether you're just getting started, maybe getting that first post out, that's success to you. Whereas when you're at Amanda's level and you're working on your 141st article, it could be a very analytics-driven form of measurement. So how do you define success when it comes to blogging, and what tools do you use to measure that success? Amanda, let's start with you.
You are spot on with analytics. That's something that I use constantly. We have goals set up there. So for people that are coming to our blog posts, how many of them are signing up for our email newsletter? How many of them are contacting us directly from there? Because, well, it's great that we have a blog, it's also something that we're putting time into. So we want to get some kind of return, and since we're spending so much time on it now, we want to know what's working, what's not working, what can we change to get more benefit from it. So that's part of it. You know, things like brand awareness that we're getting from it. It's difficult to gauge. I can tell you that when we go to conferences, we hear more people saying, oh, DGR, we know who you are, we read your blog article, and that's great to hear. And that, for part of it, for us, is definitely a huge success.
Joe, how about you?
Analytics are huge. I don't get to spend a whole lot of time looking through the numbers like I wish I did or could. I haven't made the time to do that. But the technology and the tools available today are just amazing. You can track just about everything. And Amanda touched on setting goals. You know, an operation that size, it's got to just be crucial to be able to track those things. For me, success is I get a phone call from a client that read one of my articles and said, hey, I really liked how you talked about this in your article, or I liked how you mentioned when you served this person, you did it in such a way I didn't know you could do that. I like your style. I get one call where a person mentions one article. That's a huge success for that article for me. I don't need to get any other feedback on it. That's enough. And it's always a success just to finish an article and to reread it and to like what I wrote. So for me, in my operation, it's just getting the feedback. Any sort of feedback is wonderful, and it lets me know that people are reading what I'm writing, they're understanding it, and it's providing some value to people.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways from this conversation is that there are multiple forms of success, even just going through writing one blog post. And while some of your measuring definitely needs to relate back to what your goal was, if your goal was to increase traffic, you have to go back and check that in analytics. That's how you measure whether or not it was successful based on your goal. But there is a certain accomplishment that comes from being able to say, hey, I put this information out there, and then learning that people are reading it, and then getting to that next level where you're hearing that people are following that, and they want to see what's coming from you. And that's kind of the big overall success of doing multiple blog posts. But getting a conversion, turning a reader into someone who calls who's now a client, that is also a great success. So my recommendation when setting goals is to understand how you're going to measure those goals, but also acknowledge and reward yourself for the success of completing this blog post and putting that information out there. We're getting kind of close to our allotted time, so I'm going to start wrapping things up. To each of you, I want to ask, what is your number one biggest do? Absolutely do this. If you're going to blog at all, do this one thing. What is your biggest do for blogging? Joe, let's start with you.
Number one's just got to be to share valuable information. That's been kind of the number one goal for me. I hope I've shown through this conversation that you don't have to be an expert with analytics. You don't have to have a full day's work to devote, every day to writing blog posts. You can do it on the time you have, but you've got to drill down to that valuable information. It's not worthwhile to just put a bunch of fluff out there just to have words that are published online for people to find. It's got to be, hard-hitting, pertinent information. So the number one do is just take that information that you know better than anybody else or better than your peers, and boil that down, express it to the people that are going to be reading your post. And if you focus on that, a lot of the other stuff will kind of fall into place.
Absolutely. And Amanda, what about you?
I completely agree. Valuable content is one of the best things that you could do. I mean, it's the best. And I would also say consistency. If you don't think you'll have a lot of time, you can definitely start small, once a month. But that will kind of get people to know your name, to know that you're putting stuff out there. If you do one post every 5 months, it's definitely great and it'll help your business. But if you do it once a month, then people will know that you're putting out this content. It'll help your site more, it'll get you more traffic, and people will know to go to your site for those posts.
Yeah, I think you also touched on another thing. It's very brave to get started. And putting out content is definitely, putting out good quality content is better than not putting out content. Putting out mediocre content is not better than putting out no content, because you're not going to see the return on your investment, and your resources likely could be better used elsewhere. But I think you both touched on a really key component, which is putting that quality content out there and pushing yourself, trusting yourself that you can get this information out there in a way that is digestible and makes sense to your reader. Rolling off of that, what would you say is the biggest don't for blogging? Amanda, let's go back to you.
I would say don't get caught up in what is the perfect blog post. Everyone is out there every day serving. Everyone has expertise, and everyone knows too that no service is exactly the same. So there's something that you've encountered that I'm sure is valuable for someone else to know, and that I wouldn't get caught up in thinking, oh, is this something that's I should be writing about or shouldn't be. If you think it's an important thing, odds are that it's definitely important to other process servers too.
That's a great tip. Joe, how about you?
I'd say just don't write a post just for the sake of writing a post. It goes back to the quality content. You've got to have something important, something valuable to share with people. We've all seen sites that will have a couple of 200-word articles that are just peppered with the keyword phrases that that blogger wants to kind of hit on and get picked up. I'd just say don't write with the only intention being this article is going to be about this keyword, and I'm going to hammer that keyword hard for this one specific goal of raising some SEO on one of my pages. I think that's pretty transparent, when people do that, and I think give your readers the benefit of the doubt and say they're going to understand and recognize when you're providing quality content that's going to help them in some way, rather than just I'm hammering away at this tool to help my website so I can make more money.
That actually rolls into my kind of don't for this conversation, which is don't expect immediate success. Your first blog post may not be the one that hits it out of the park that everybody's sharing and that is getting clients in the door, but your third or fourth one might. So don't give up. Don't expect that you're going to have success the first try, because that's really rare. It takes time to get the hang of your own blogging style and strategy and figuring out where your voice fits into this industry. So don't give up. Don't expect immediate success, but do it. Give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, you can always reallocate those resources and focus on another component of your marketing strategy, but it's definitely worth trying. The last question that I have, we've talked about Evernote and Hootsuite, but what other one tool would you recommend that every process server who either is already blogging or wants to start blogging starts using today? Joe, let's start with you.
I was going to mention Evernote as my one tool. We've already touched on that, so I guess I'll go back to what helps me more than anything, I think, is having an audio recorder. I have an app on my phone. I hit a button, it starts recording. I can unleash my thoughts as I'm driving most times when I can't stop and write something down or generate some text on my phone. Just being able to capture your ideas. You never know when your inspiration for a great article is going to come. Sometimes you have a flash, and within a few seconds, it's like you've got kind of the idea of what you want your finished product to be. Now it's just a matter of getting those details out. So being able to to document and record what I'm thinking at the time when kind of that inspiration hits, rare as it may be. That's been a great tool. You come back to the office, you listen to what you said. Once you get over listening to your own voice all the time, you find out that, hey, I had some really good ideas. Let's turn that into an article. You start writing, and there you go.
That's such a great suggestion, and I love that it's rooted in the creation of the content and not the distribution or what it's actually doing once it's on the website. I think a lot of that gets overlooked in this whole blogging process, so thank you so much for adding that tool. Amanda, what one tool would you recommend for every process server who wants to blog?
I'm still stuck on Evernote, I guess because I'm in the office so much. I'm constantly on my computer, so for me, I'm not out and about, and that's the best way for me to remember things. So aside from that, I mean, between that and Hootsuite, those are my two go-to tools. Those are things that I use constantly every time that I blog.
Excellent. And then my one tool that I would recommend is Google Docs. It's just a word processing program, but it's hosted online. It automatically saves your information if your computer crashes or accidentally shuts down. That blog post you've been working on for 3 days is still going to be there. And it's also great for sharing with other people in your company and getting comments and feedback. Or even with family and friends, just get your blog out to somebody else to read just to get some other eyes on it. But it's a really great tool just for actually writing the blog post. So that's my recommendation. Do either of you have any final thoughts to add or any other thoughts on blogging that we haven't touched on yet today?
I just wanted to mention, I really wanted to convey today, first, thanks of course for the opportunity to be on this panel. It's been wonderful. I just wanted to convey to a lot of people out there that might be in kind of the same situation I'm in. I know a lot of process servers are kind of one-man shows or small operations. I'm not a professional writer, I'm not a professional blogger, but I enjoy doing it, and the more that I've done it, the benefits I've gotten from it far exceeded what I thought I would get. So kind of one final thought for me, I guess, is if you have any sort of interest and you think writing in general might be something that can help you in your business, just do it. Sit down and write something. If you write every day, you kind of get into the flow, you get into the habit. Just start doing it. That was the biggest thing for me, is just sitting down and starting to write. And once you do it, you might find that it's something you're good at and something that's more enjoyable and beneficial than you thought before you started.
Great. And Amanda, anything for you to add?
I completely agree. The same thing. Just get started doing it. I'm hopeful that after this panel, I'll see more blogs popping up everywhere. But Joe's right. The more that you do it, the easier that it gets. It doesn't take a whole hour every time. It might take you 20 minutes, a half hour, and those blog posts that still take you 3 hours will bring you a great return. So, thank you again for having me today, and hopefully after this, we'll see some more bloggers.
Yeah, I'm also definitely excited to see new voices coming into the process server blogging community. I can't wait to see what everybody else has to say. Joseph and Amanda, thank you so much for joining and offering your insight into blogging. We're running out of time, but this has been a great and lively discussion. ServeCon attendees, you can check out both of their blogs at dgrlegal.com/blog and at iservepapers.com/blog. For those of you who have questions and have been writing those down, remember to tweet them at us to @ServeNow or send them to kfaber@servenow.com, and keep an eye out for that blog post. We'll have that out for you early next week.